This is a box full of clothing items that I was either given or that I thrifted. I had this for about 2 years now, and I would finally like to start making these things into different things, but I really can't until I first get rid of my fabric scraps. And this is the pile of fabric scraps that I don't know what to do with, but also can't really force myself to just throw away. So today I'm starting a new little series on my channel called Fabric Scraps Projects, in which I'll be utilizing my fabric scraps on a regular basis to basically prevent having a load of them again. So I started by going through all the scraps and grouping the same colored smallest pieces together, but I quickly realized that probably the best way to go about this would be to use the patchwork technique, so that's what I decided for. The whole cutting process turned out to be a pretty hard task though, which I didn't expect, and it really took me way longer than it should have, but after almost 4 hours, yes, 4 hours, of trying to fit my patterns on a fabric, I managed to cut them all out, and here are all 3 different sewing patterns ready to use. And you can download 2 of the sewing patterns for free from the website that I linked in my description box. There you can pick and download your exact size for beret and for cloche or bucket hat. The 8-panel newsboy hat pattern is a bit more complicated, and I couldn't find a free pattern for you, so instead I provided at least the one I drafted for myself. It's an S size with 56 centimeters head measurement, and you can download the PDF either in A4 or in letter format depending on your printer. So the Beret Hat pattern pieces I cut out only from this red fabric because I had enough of it and I really thought it's perfect for this project. I made the 6 cm wide stripe 3 cm wide only instead, and I also cut out this tiny 3 by 4 cm rectangle to put on the top of a beret. Since I didn't cut my pieces out on fold, I first had to sew together the pieces that were supposed to be just one piece, so the headband and the bottom brim of the hat. After that I sewed up the remaining sides too, and that created the loops. Then I found the middle of the circle pattern and I marked it, and I folded the little rectangle in half and sewed like this. It was a bit tricky, but I managed to turn the thing right size out, and this is what it looked like. Then I just sewed it to the top of the circle pattern. Then it was time to assemble by simply laying the brim on the circle fabric, right size facing, and sewing all around the outside edge. I didn't show it here, but I turned the thing around, pressed the seam allowance open and did the top stitch all the way around on the top and on the bottom of that line that I sewed originally. Then, matching the side seams with the right size kissing again, I sewed the headband to the brim and same way as before, I pressed the seam allowance open and top stitched all around both on top and on the bottom. I repeated the whole process again with the lining, and to attach it to the shell, I just pinned the lining head to the shell head, right size touching, and I sewed around, leaving a little gap unsewed. Then I turned the head right size out and I sewed up the hole. As a last thing, I did the top stitch all around the headband and the beret was done. With the bucket hat, I started the same way and first sewed up the bits that were supposed to be one pattern piece. So I sewed up the brim halves first, and then these 4 pieces that made the middle panel of the bucket hat. I sewed the light blue panels to the jean panels lengthwise like this, And then when that was done, I laid those panels down in a way that the colors would alternate, and I sewed up the sides. This is what it looked like after, and when I had the individual pieces ready, I started to assemble the head. I pinned and sewed the middle panel to the oval part of the head, and this time I did top stitch only on the bottom of the sewed line, because I just didn't think it was necessary to do it on top. Then, matching the notches, I pinned and sewed the brim to the rest of the head, and I did the top stitch the same way as before, only on the bottom. I should have ironed the interfacing to the brim here, but I only had a little bit left for the Bakerboy hat, so I left it like that, but you should definitely do it to make the brim more sturdy. Then I pinned lining and shell heads together, right sides facing, and I sewed all around, once again leaving a gap unsewed. And then I just turned it all right sides out, sewed up the hole, did the top stitch all around the edge, and the bucket head was done. To the Bakerboy Hat pattern, I added just this little circle that should be big enough to encase your button. Or if you want, you can add the same little thingy as on a beret, but I used the button and I wrapped that fabric around it, hand sewed it and set it aside. Then I sewed the sides of the headbands, both lining and the shell. As for the brim, I ironed the interfacing on one of the pieces and sewed the pieces together right sides facing. Then I made a little cut on that curve, as close to the seam as I could, obviously without cutting through the seam, and I turned the brim right sides out and top stitched it. This is what it looked like. Then I started to connect the main head pieces. I pinned all 8 pieces together, right sides kissing, alternating the colors. Once it was done, I repeated the same process with the lining, and this is what it looked like. Then I found and marked the middle of the brim, and I did the same for the headbands. And I didn't show it here, but I ended up marking the middle of those headband halves too. So that means that the whole headband had 4 notches in total, just so it would be easier for me to sew, and it would be also more exact to sew them together like that. Then to assemble it all, I took both headbands and I encased the brim in between the headbands like this, making sure that headbands are pinned right sides kissing. Then I sewed all around, and this is what it looked like. I thought that it would look much neater if I top stitched the bottom of the headband, so that's what I did, and this is what it looked like after. I seam ripped one of the seams in the lining head to be able to turn it right sides out later. Then with the shell head I turned it wrong sides out and I pinned the headband to the shell head right sides kissing like this. I turned the lining head right sides out and I pinned it to the headband too, encasing all the raw edges inside, and I sewed it all around. Once done, I turned the hat right size out through that little hole in the lining head. Then I closed that gap by hand sewing it. I added a button to the top of the hat, and it was done.